Hi everybody, have a wonderful day. In this video talk about Sony Alpha A7R IV review. Subscribe our channel for future updates. At a glance, $2,398 per £2,499 body only. 61 megapixels full frame CMOS sensor. ISO 132,000, expandable to ISO 5100 and 2400. 10 fps continuous shooting. 5-axis in-body stabilization. 5.76 million EVF. 3 inches, 1.44 million tilt angle screen. 4K, 30 fps video. Once 36 million pixels were accepted as the norm for high-resolution full-frame cameras, Sony manufactured its second-generation model. The A7R II that made its debut in 2015 presented a groundbreaking 42.4 megapixels sensor, built-in 5-axis image stabilization and an improved body design. 2 years later Sony revisited its A7R series again. The A7R III upheld the same pixel count as its predecessor, but introduced many of the powerful features that originated in the Alpha 9, making it one of the best all-rounders for resolution, speed and high ISO image quality that we have tested. As you can see, Sony has a habit of setting new records for resolution with this series, and with its 61 million pixel BSI full-frame sensor, the A7R IV became Sony's highest resolution mirrorless camera to date. And the camera technically retains that title to this day, as its replacement, the Sony A7R V, announced in October 2022, uses the same sensor. Not one for taking its foot off the pedal, Sony took feedback from existing A7R users on board and made over 50 improvements to its new Alpha A7R IV. At the time, the A7R IV boasted one of Sony's most sophisticated autofocus systems to date, and atypical for such a high-resolution camera, also has a maximum continuous shooting rate of 10 fps with continuous AF and exposure. The Alpha A7R IV also marked a break with its traditional design, as Sony made some changes to the controls and handling compared to its predecessors. The biggest change was the addition of the multi-selector joystick, which is now a must-have feature for many photographers. We take a look at all of these features and more in our in-depth Sony A7R IV review. For more options, have a look at the best Sony cameras or our guide to the best full-frame camera. Sony Alpha A7R IV firmware updates. The Sony A7R IV has had several firmware updates since its launch. These include significant AF enhancements, such as adding support for real-time IAF, human, animal, and real-time tracking, wide area focal plane phase detection AF coverage and focal plane phase detection AF, as well as AF and high-speed continuous shooting features. A7R IV updates have also added support A-mount lenses via Sony's A-mount adapter. You can find all of the Sony A7R IV firmware updates on Sony's website. Sony Alpha A7R IV review, features. The A7R IV is the first camera to showcase a 61 million pixel back illuminated full-frame sensor, with on-chip phase detection for autofocus. This sensor partners up with Sony's latest generation BIONZX image processor and front-end LSI, with the aim of delivering unprecedented resolution, fine gradation and a 15-stop dynamic range at the low end of its ISO 132,000, expandable to ISO 5100 and 2400 range. Despite an increase in resolution, there's no reduction in speed. It'll happily shoot a continuous burst of 14-bit RAW files at 10 fps for up to 7 seconds, up to 8 fps in live view continuous shooting mode, with full AF, air tracking using its refined, low-vibration mechanical shutter or silent electronic shutter. Sony claims 68 images, extra fine JPEGs or compressed RAW files, can be shot in a single burst at 10 fps, which increases to 200 when the A7R IV's APS-C crop mode is used. We've seen APS-C, Super 35mm modes on an A7 series cameras before, but the A7R IV's increase in resolution means you get a very useful 26.2 megapixels output after cropping a full-frame image down to APS-C size. What's more, the autofocus points remain in the same position as they are for full-frame, resulting in a healthy 99% coverage across virtually the entire frame. Out of APS-C crop mode there are 567 phase detection AF points covering 99.7% height and 74% width of the image area. These are assisted by 425 contrast detection AF points, the same number as on the A7R III. Sony's 4D focus technology is available for sports and action photographers who don't want to lose sight of erratic subjects. It uses special algorithms to detect fast action and predict your subject's next move without getting distracted by obstacles in the frame. Sony's artificial intelligence (AI) subject recognition technology also carries across, and for the first time on an A7 series model it can be used during recording video. You can select between animal or human IAF mode depending on your shooting situation, with precise focusing in low light down to -3 EV. Another first is the A7R IV's wireless PC remote connectivity, which now supports wireless tethering for better freedom in the studio or out on location. Transfer of large uncompressed RAW images has been made faster too with a new algorithm for wired PC remote shooting. On the topic of professional features, pros who need to promptly deliver their images will also value the support of FTP background transfer during and after shooting. In total, up to 9 FTP servers can be assigned in advance. Another feature the camera inherits from the A7R III is its 5-axis, in-body image stabilization. As well as compensating for the common pitch and yaw movements, it adds corrections for movements of the camera vertically and sideways, with the 5th axis corresponding to the rotational correction around the lens axis, crucial for movie shooting and ensuring high-resolution handheld images remain pin-sharp. The great thing about it is that it works with practically any lens and effectively allows users to shoot up to 5.5 stops slower than would otherwise be possible. Those who want to avoid shake caused by pressing the shutter button can trigger the camera wirelessly using a mobile device running Sony's free Imaging Edge mobile app for Android and iOS. Alternatively, Sony's RMTP1BT wireless remote controller can be purchased for £65. Build and handling. A number of the improvements that have been made to the A7R IV are based around the body. Its form factor might not look any different, but when you inspect it closely you realize there are more changes than first meet the eye. The handling of Sony's A7 series cameras has come under scrutiny in the past. Sony has enlarged the hand grip to improve the experience for people with average-sized or larger hands. This contributes to more of an assured feel than the A7R III when it's coupled to large and heavy telephoto lenses, without being too bulky. I'd go as far as saying it's the best feeling hand grip of any A7 series model Sony has made. However, as stressed when we reviewed the A7R III, the gap between hand grip and lens mount remains fairly tight. This isn't an issue when you're working with bare hands or thin gloves, but in colder climates where thick gloves are essential, it would be a struggle to squeeze fingers into the gap. Viewfinder and screen. Unlike the A7R III, which employs a 3.69 million dot electronic viewfinder, the A7R IV is the first A7 series camera to sport a new and improved 5.76 million dot UXGA OLED electronic viewfinder. It's the finest example of any EVF we've used on an A7 series model. It affords an impressive viewing experience with the advantage of being able to view exposure changes live as they're made. Depending on your preference, it can be set to a display speed of 60 fps or 120 fps, with the latter rendering fast motion better at the expense of consuming a little more battery power. Below the EVF very little has changed. The A7R IV adopts the same 3 inches, 1.44 million dot tilt angle screen from the Sony A7R III. Once again Sony has persisted with it being tilt only. Though it offers assistance with low and high angled shooting in the landscape format, it doesn't offer the same flexibility in the portrait format. It would have been great had Sony decided to use the more maneuverable type of 3-way tilt screen as you find on cameras like the Panasonic Lumix S1, S1R and Fujifilm X-T3, X-T2. The focus point can be moved and magnified images examined in playback mode with a double tap of the area on the touchscreen. Handy enough, though other manufacturers provide more scope with theirs. The A7R IV menu cannot be navigated by touch, nor can you make exposure adjustments, select icons from the FN menu, or swipe through images. Given how technologically advanced the A7R IV is in most other areas of its specification, the touchscreen control feels out of date. Sony may have offered a better screen on such a high-end model. Performance. The image quality from the A7R II's 42.4 megapixels sensor was remarkable, but the 61 megapixels images from the A7R IV go one better. In our Sony A7R IV review we found that the fine detail it resolves is phenomenal. For this, be aware that optical flaws and the slightest sign of camera shake will be evident. The good news is that the 5-axis image stabilization is remarkably effective at ensuring the camera can be used handheld, but, as a matter of principle, you should keep the shutter speed high when using the camera unsupported. Dynamic range is astonishing at the low end of the ISO range too, with the ability to pull out immense detail from dark shadows without excessive noise creeping in. To prevent highlights being blown out in high contrast scenes, such as in the image above, I opted to expose for the brighter parts in the scene and then process the raw file to lift the shadows and balance the exposure. I could unfold the metering system in use. It rarely misread a scene, and much the same can be said for the auto white balance system. Color is consistently faithful, resulting in images that appear neither too warm or too cool. If you end up shooting JPEGs more than you do RAWs, you may wish to tweak the creative style settings. As an example, I preferred the look of monochrome images after upping the contrast to +2 in black and white mode. With each generation we've seen the A7R get faster and more responsive. Once again, we're not left disappointed by the focusing performance of the A7R IV. One area where it really excels is its AI-based real-time autofocus. Using it on a portrait shoot at the coast was a brilliant test and demonstrated how accurate it is at identifying a face within the frame. The smaller of the two green AF squares reveals which eye of your subject it has locked onto. When shooting portraits with a shallow depth of field, you'll likely want the camera to focus on the eye closest to the camera. More often than not, the camera gets this right. If it selects the wrong eye or you have your own ideas, there's the option to specify the eye to focus on from the AF2 menu settings. Out in the field, I was very impressed by the way it faultlessly switched between focusing on the subject's face and eye, even managing to hold focus when the model looked down or away from the camera. The same could be said when I attempted photographing a few dogs at a local fair after changing the subject detection from human to animal. Those who shoot pets or animals on safari using telephoto lenses will find animal IAF extremely useful. My only criticism, which was also mentioned in our recent Sony CyberShot RX107 review, is that animal IAF can't be combined with focus tracking like it can when subject detection is set to humans. As usual from Sony, you get an array of focus area modes to choose from. In wide mode, the camera attempts to identify the subject wherever it may be in the frame, with zone restricting it to a smaller area. In flexible spot mode, you can position the focus point manually almost anywhere in the frame using the joystick, and with expand flexible spot, surrounding focus points are used to assist the camera in focusing. Continuous focusing on fast-moving subjects is very hasty. It seemed untroubled when I asked it to keep focus on a group of cyclists traveling towards the camera at speed. Although the hit rate of sharp shots in a burst might not be quite as high as you'd get on the sports and action-focused Alpha 9, you can't really fault the speed at which the A7R IV keeps up with subjects that move. Image quality. The A7R IV's new sensor has got a lot of photographers excited about what we can expect from the next wave of high-resolution full-frame cameras. As we predicted, the lab results from our Sony A7R IV review are the best we've ever recorded from a high-resolution full-frame chip. Its 9504 x 6336 pixel count equates to a 31.6 x 21.1 inches or 80.4 x 53.6 centimeters print at a critically sharp 300 pixels per inch output resolution. Even when you crop down to APS-C mode, you can still capture 6240 x 4160 pixel files that measure 20.8 x 13.8 inches, 52.8 x 35.2 centimeters. The APS-C crop mode will be appreciated by animal photographers who typically rely on cropping after capturing images of quickly moving animals, birds afar. Resolution. Looking at RAW files processed using Adobe Camera Raw, it's evident that the A7R IV captures mesmerizing detail from its 61.0 megapixels sensor, which forgoes an optical low-pass filter, OPLF. At ISO 100, the sensor achieves approximately 5,400 lines per picture height, which exceeds all figures we've previously recorded by other high-resolution full-frame mirrorless cameras. Resolution gradually drops off as the ISO is increased, with 5000 lph being measured at ISO 800 and 4600 lph at ISO 6400. As to be expected, the level of detail beyond this point does start to reduce as the influence of noise becomes more prominent. That being said, it still manages a staggering result of 4400 lph at ISO 12800 and 4000 lph at ISO 51200. From the crops below, multiply the number below the lines by 400 to calculate the resolution on lines per picture height. These were shot with an E-mount version of the Sigma 85mm f1.4 DGH-SMR. Noise. The high ISO performance of Sony's high-resolution sensors these last few years has been astonishing, and the A7R IV continues this trend. Opening RAW files in Adobe Camera Raw and examining them at 100% tells us clean, noise-free images are produced between ISO 100 and ISO 1600. Noise starts to creep in at ISO 3200 and ISO 6400, but it's so negligible and inoffensive it won't stop you using these settings. I found that acceptable results can be achieved at ISO 12800 and ISO 25600 too, however you will find yourself wanting to apply a little noise reduction during post-processing. Color remains well saturated and punchy between ISO 50 and ISO 12800, with a hint of a green tinge creeping in at ISO 25600 and above. The upper ISO 51200 and ISO 100 and 4200 settings might sound good to have, but you'll want to give these a wide berth as the image quality really starts to visibly degrade. Verdict: the Sony A7R IV is the new master of resolution in the full-frame market. By developing the world's first 61 megapixels full-frame sensor, Sony has taken image quality to new heights, something that has been achieved without making a compromise on speed. The fine detail it resolves in its files is astonishing, and so is the performance at high ISO. Then there's the wide dynamic range, which offers great latitude from its RAW files, and the option to switch over to APS-C mode from the touch of a button, which turns it into an accomplished camera for sport, action or wildlife. It's great to see Sony addressing some of the comments we made in our Sony A7R III review, with its larger hand grip, weather seals and subtle changes to buttons and dials further improving its build and handling. Other advancements such as the improved phase detection AF coverage, the option to change the focus frame color, and ability to use Sony's fabulous real-time animal AF focusing during video recording are all well received. All of the above is very complimentary, but there are still a few quibbles. The huge RAW files have a big effect on storage, so you should be prepared for memory cards and external hard drives to fill up quickly. There's the processing power of your computer to think about too, which needs to be speedy if you'd like to turn around images fast and avoid frustrating delays during post-processing. I'd like to see Sony take a leaf out of Canon's book and develop a sensible RAW compression for its RAW files to help save valuable memory card and disk space without a noticeable impact on image quality. The excellent electronic viewfinder and effective 5-axis in-body stabilization are great to have, however it's a shame they're not supported by a better screen that allows you to tilt it for low, high portrait shooting. The limited touchscreen control and convoluted menu system that consists of 197 options across 6 pages, makes settings hard to find in a hurry, especially if you're new to an A7 series camera. These are 2 areas we'd like to see Sony improve its high-resolution marvel in the future. To sum up, the Sony A7R IV is an incredibly powerful mirrorless camera that sets a new benchmark. The resolution will be overkill for many amateurs and enthusiasts, however pros, commercial photographers and those who regularly shoot high-resolution images for stock agencies will be sorely tempted. To answer my earlier question, Sony has successfully created one of the finest high-resolution full-frame mirrorless offerings on the market. It's not perfect in every way, but is right up there as one of best mirrorless cameras money can buy and has seriously impressed us on test. The great news for those who can't justify spending $2,398 per £2,499 on the A7R IV is that the cost of the A7R III has plummeted to £1,699 or £800 saving on its launch price from 4 years ago. The A7R III remains an extremely capable high-resolution mirrorless camera by today's standards, and this already popular model is likely to become even more in demand in the coming months at such a tempting price. Thanks for watching this video. For more updates, touch with us. What you think about Sony Alpha A7R IV, comment below.